of you already know me. I'm more interested to people with more specialized needs. I'm interested about disabled groups, and especially people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And the collaboration with Dr. He is we want to understand whether textual analysis, textual mining, to what extent textual mining can help us in the area of consumer health literacy, consumer health barriers for people with disabilities. So if I'm many of you are interested in health, and I believe many of you already know that we have the gap between health professionals and health consumers, and that gap has been discussed by so many scholars in our field, in public health field. And the major concern for this is the language health professionals they use are far more professional and complex than the language lay people use, right? So for example, here I have diagnosed a high blood pressure, and for professionals they will use hypertension instead of high blood pressure, and they will include more of the professional language that might be hard for health consumers to understand. So there are many discussions. There are many discussions and many textual simplification work in this area. They try to bridge and make the communication better between health professionals and health consumers. When all the articles you have read on the public public med or other health materials that aim to educate health consumers, they need to double check whether the language they use can be understandable by lay people. So a lot of work is going in that area, but when I start to work and learn from disabled groups, the other thing we talk about the differences between health professionals and customers in terms of their health language use. But very few studies talk about the possible differences among different health consumer groups. When I read in the literature, many studies talking about how disabled people, ASD people, deaf people, and other people with low literacy, low health literacy, they have even like higher gap or more gap between them and health professionals in terms of effective communication. And part of that reason is the complexity of the language, the different groups they use. So this come to the question that we need to pay more attention to the differences among different user groups in terms of their way using different health language, and especially health language with different level of complexity. There are differences among different health user groups, and if we want to provide more adaptive health information to users, we need to consider their ability to communicate the health language with different complexities. So, and in order to reach that far goal, the first step is there a way for us, for us to evaluate or estimate their health language complexity difference. And if you look into the literature, the main area that is focusing on that issue is we call it e-health literacy. E-health literacy among different health consumers. I'm not sure if some of you are interested in that area or have heard of e-heals. It's more using survey. It's more using survey and have a bunch of questions, and that survey has a structure. E-heals has a structure like they try to evaluate your literacy level from different perspectives, and they develop certain questions in your survey and rate you based on your survey score. And that is a main approach. That is the main approach for like our industry problem. But what we feel is lacking is that, so if you think the term of e-health literacy or the construct and or the e-health literacy story, the scope is far more broad than the health language complexity issue. In the e-heals part of the story, they're evaluating whether you are able to understand the more complex health terms or use more the general literacy level, but they also have aspects like in other perspectives for the e-health literacy, not only the usage of complex health language, but also it's to, I didn't include the e-heals that construct there, but the general scope of e-health literacy, that measurement is very limited to survey method, and also not that specifically to the textual complexity or health textual complexity among different user groups. And we really need to understand their term use differences from a very not an abstractive perspective, whether it's more of a subjective feedback in the e-heals survey. Do you have difficulties to communicate with health professionals, or do you know the health terms and they evaluate themselves by doing the Likert scale? That's not a objective measurement. And so we are thinking whether that is possible to evaluate the health language complexity differences by different health user groups, and using textual mining. Why we want to use textual mining? Because survey is very valuable, but it's really hard. It's really hard to recruit people from minority groups if you are doing survey interview observation. Most of the studies I have read, especially for deaf and hard hearing, the sample is like 20 people, 40 people. The sample size is quite small and really hard to reach out to that group of people. And so if you want to understand from like a bigger scope, especially from our researchers, it's hard. And the other thing is the many disabled groups, they have very strong online communities. Very strong online communities, and they exchange their health concerns there very intensively. So this gives us a lot of data, textual data online. So we wonder whether there is a way for us to understand the e-health literacy differences, not the general e-health literacy, but their health texture complexity differences between different consumer health groups. So, and we collected data from 3 online forums, online communities. The first one is All Deaf. That is one of the biggest online discussion board and online community for deaf and hard hearing people. And Round Planet, that is the biggest for ASD. And Yahoo Answers, it used to be the biggest venue for people to exchange their questions related to health and other topics. So we chose these 3 venues, and we want to test. We want to test our different this taxonomy is derived from other textual mining like techniques to compare the health text complexity. And we develop a taxonomy from previous literature, and if we want to measure health language complexity from the textual level and from the text mining objective perspective, it can be divided into 2 main categories. If we want to measure the complexity, we can see the complexity of the text itself, and we can also see the complexity in terms of usage of health vocabulary. And to do the text complexity, we utilized some traditional readability metrics, and also the POS distribution. I will talk the detailed techniques in this taxonomy later, but it's all of these are available techniques that are used by other scholars doing other problems. We just berry picking different techniques, and we think this could help us to understand the text complexity. So yeah, you're free to criticize us of any maybe misuse or of different measurements here. So the first one, health textual complexity, refer to the complexity of the text itself, and it's not quite for the health domain, but if you think about complexity, it matters. It matters if you use like many long terms in your sentences, or your sentence pretty long, and the term you're using have many syllables inside. So the traditional readability measurements, their goal is they count the word number, they count, they measure the sentence length, and they also count the syllables. And their assumption is the more syllables within one word, the more complex that word is. And if you have more complex word in your sentence, that means your sentence itself is more complex. And they have some formulas here. The most famous one and traditional one is called FK, grade level. They use this formula, and they make up this formula to map to K-12 grades. So if I use this formula for a textual body, and the score of FK is 3, that means that the complexity can be understood by students who master like K-12, like grade 3 level of understanding. So higher the grade is, higher the score is, that means the more complex the text is. So we use those formulas to help us understand, like, consumers of different groups, what in terms of textual complexity, what's the differences. Another textual level complexity is, we call it POS, part of speech distribution. So for the assumption behind the POS distribution analysis is, if within the sentences, if you have the sentences have more content words than functional words, that sentence is more complex. And what we refer to content words are the nouns, adjectives, verbs, and functional words, pronouns, determiner, preposition, qualifier, conjunction, and interjection. So higher the ratio of the content words divided by the function words, the more complex of the text they are. So this is the assumption of that measurement. And we use POS distribution and traditional readability metrics to evaluate the textual complexity itself. And we also want to understand what is a complexity related to health. And we operationalize that into to what extent people will use professional health terms. And if they use non-professional terms, do they use more complex health consumer terms or not? So this comes to 2 categories, 3 measurements here. We extracted all the health terms that mentioned by users, and we also mapped all the health terms to the SNOMED CT terms. That is the biggest corpus for the professional health terms. So we use this ratio. To refer to what extent that people will use professional health terms, and also there is another thesaurus called CHV. CHV term diction. CHV is a lot of researchers and health professionals, they develop a big dictionary with more than 40,000 or 20,000 terms, health terms. So they extract the common lay health terms used by health customers, and also they give many terms a score called familiarity score. So, and the lower the score is, the less familiar that term is for health customers. So maybe blood has a familiarity score nearly to 1. The score is 0 to 1. So maybe blood has a score 0.95, and hypertension has a score of 0.45, something like that. So we can use that familiarity score to as another measurement for the term level, health term level complexity. Yeah. So as a summary, this taxonomy is quite important for our project. So if you have any criticism of the ways we utilize all those measurements, let us know.
So you guys created this? From things that already you put them together?
Yeah, there is a small area of study called health readability measurement, but the goal of those type of studies is trying to measure whether the texts are readable by users, and they have different measurements. We learn from them, but our goal is different from their goal. Our goal is just to use complexity differences and use that for the health customers. Yeah, and if I summarize it, so we want to see whether they use more complex words and sentences from traditional readability metrics, and we want to learn whether they use more content words instead of functional words, because that's another indication for textual level complexity. And for the term level complexity, we use all the prevalence of professional terms. These are developed from Dr. He and I, our discussions. So we want to, the basic assumption is to what extent they use professional health terms instead of lay health terms. And for the familiarity score, that is helpful to check whether that term is less or more familiar to customers. So that will be another indication to measure the health term level of complexity.
Great.
Yeah, that's I cannot say that it's a complete taxonomy to measure the health texture complexity, but these are what we have developed so far, and we think these are doable for us. But because currently we are developing the journal article, so we need to be very careful, because we want to propose this method. We need to be very careful what will be how can we use this method in future settings, and what might be possible limitations, and considering possible limitations, is that a way for us to fix it with using our future study? So we need to think very careful about that, and I highly appreciate if you can give us some ideas. Any questions or thoughts or reflections on this taxonomy? Okay. We developed this taxonomy, and from our general understanding of the differences, we have a vague understanding that the general public, their usage of health complexity might be higher than disabled groups of ASD people and deaf and hard hearing people. That's our general assumption, and we want to use all those measures and check if that's true. So this is our processing and analysis procedure. We calculated different measurements from different places, and then we do comparison among 3 groups. And in terms of comparison, we compare their distribution differences using the KS test, and we compare their differences in terms of complexity level using the man-wise U test. The reason we don't use the t-test because they are not normally distributed, and you know how noisy the textual data can be. So this will be the basic textual characteristics of 3 corpora. We use the similar amount of health posts by, we have similar amount of health posts by all deaf people and ASD users. We generate similar amount of health posts from Yahoo answers to represent the health discussion by the public. And you can see that the all deaf, although their posts are the same, similar amount, but the discussions within all deaf people, they are more condensed than ASD people and then the public. So it's different from complexity problem, but we can see when we exclude all those health discussions from 3 corpora, there are some community level differences. The different communities have different style to communicate their health concerns. And you can see in the Yahoo answers, every sentences proposed is far less than all deaf and the wrong planet. And but the average words per sentences, it seems similar. It's significant different, but it's still not that different like this one. And average syllables per word, it's similar, and average letters per word is similar. So it seems like their usage of wording are similar, but their commitment to their commitment of contribution, health contribution, seems a little bit different. The deaf people, they would like to go from every thread and talk more and more and more, but if you see the publics, they just speak very little for every thread.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Real quick? So just from my experiences with Wrong Planet, not every user of Wrong Planet who engages in the discussions actually has ASD.
Yeah,
Is there any
that's.
way to isolate?
It's really hard to identify the user profile because it's not specified under the profile. You need to do very advanced textual analysis, and it's not accurate. So we do user level studies, but we cannot say that our findings is an like very accurate finding to represent ASD people. But I do believe that if most people are deaf, most people in the Wrong Planet, they are ASD and deaf people, the corpus and the general the average like results do reflect that direction. It's just the significant differences between different groups. The score itself might be different, but the direction, we can see the direction from here. Yeah, that is another tricky part to use textual analysis to under different user groups, because you need to consider the noisiness of the text. But that doesn't mean that this method is not valuable at all.
Before you move on from there, I have just one thought.
Yes.
At the top in the previous slide. Did you guys also look at, I'm assuming all three of these discussion groups work on different platforms?
What?
They work on different platforms, like there's different software underneath the...
The Yahoo Answers is more of a social media kind of open, more open compared to the forum base. The ASD Wrong Planet and All Deaf, they are building under the similar software platform and the social designs of all the stuff. But the Yahoo Answers is more question answer related. So, and it's a pity that we are not allowed. There are some online forums for public to share their health concerns, but we are not allowed to use their data. So we need to compromise and use the Yahoo Answers.
Well, I think these are great forums to look at. I guess the only reason why that thought about platforms even crossed my mind is because I was wondering about the 8,000 threads. Of course, that probably reflects the greater number of users, but maybe there's something about the interface of Yahoo Answers that encourages people to add a new thread rather than read through all the other existing threads, that it's maybe laborious to do that, so people just create a new thread.
Yeah, I think Casimir, you may know more about the cohesiveness of different online communities. Yeah, for All Deaf and Wrong Planet, they are more like close community. But social media in general, they are very quite open. And if you consider about, they can come and leave, but for the other two people, the users will have more commitment. And we want to alleviate the impact of different contribution style. So when we do the comparison, we control the sentences they contribute proposed by different users. So we control the impact from different contribution level and see their complexity difference. This is just one way we trying to alleviate the possible impacts.
They do seem remarkably similar. I was just wondering how many conclusions we can really draw from the number of threads, but it was very interesting to see how similar the length of the sentences and the complexity of the words.
Yeah, only like they mean that if you come to the sentence level, it's comparable.
Mm-hmm.
It's comparable. So we can still do this study. And if you, we also extract all the health terms they have mentioned and map them to the health semantics. And we extracted like every corpus they have mentioned over 70 health semantics, and I just list the top 10 health semantics of 3 corpora. And if you can see that, although the ranking is a little different, but the top 10 health semantics by different health groups, although they are talking about different health issues, but the health semantics they use are pretty similar. It's just the ranking is a little different. So it's another interesting thing to find here. And we check, we draw their distributions, and we calculate the number of distinct health terms used by different users proposed, and we draw the distribution here. So the Y here, it represents what percentage of users they do 1 to 5 health terms proposed, and to the range starting from 1 to more than 50. And it's very interesting that the public is this, but for ASD and deaf and hard hearing, we have the users who use very little health terms, and also we have users who use quite a lot health terms. It's very interesting to see that. So we found like the health terms on average, the deaf and hard hearing people is more than ASD and more than the public. And it's just, maybe in the future we can dig into this heavy usage of health term users, whether they are ASD people or whether they are professionals. It might be very interesting to check the details of that type of data. So in terms of POS distribution, it's very interesting that in terms of content words divided by the function words, the three groups, this type of complexity, these 3 groups didn't show any differences if you control the contribution level, the sentences number of 3 groups. So, and you can see that all people use more content words than functional words in their health discussion, and the highest range And in terms of traditional readability metrics, we use 3 FK score, gunning fork, and smog. The philosophy and the formula they use are different, but the way they evaluate the complexity is similar. To just check, use number of syllables per word and other metrics to evaluate the complexity. So more it's have more diverse in terms of different religious for. And another observation for this one is we found like ASD people, they would like to use more complex sentences than the general public and the definite have here, but there's no difference between these two. And I talked this finding with Christina, and she said it's reasonable in that way because their way to communicate with others, they would like to use more I don't know how I can put it, but
It's easier for them to communicate online.
yeah,
Where they have the
it's easier.
chance to formulate their response versus the response they might give to somebody face to face.
Yeah, and they would like to do this to spend more time and energy to use the word. But this finding is contradicting with other findings when they do surveys and interviews with observations with the ASD people. And I think for those type of studies, they might feel uncomfortable if someone is watching all them. So it's a very interesting finding we have here. And in terms of to what extent people use professional terms, we found that the general public is far more, their dependence on professional terms is higher than ASD people, but these two groups, they have no difference. So this aligns to our assumption that the complexity differences is reflected in the term level. And we can see from here, most public, they have more than 95% of all the health terms they have used, more than 50% of them. But the ASD and the DHH, they use less. They use less health terms. And we want to exclude the CHV terms from the SNOMED CT terms. So there is an overlap between the dictionary of disorder. So there were some terms both used by health professionals and health users, and we exclude that overlap so that we can argue the SNOMED CT minus CHV, we can have the core professional terms that has less opportunity to be used by health customers. So, and we try to see the distribution of the three groups, and we find still general public has a far more core professional terms than the other two groups. And you can see the distribution are quite different. And most like ASD people, they use very little core professional health terms, but most public, the more than 40% of the public, they use core professional health terms. And in terms of familiarity score, the distributions are similar. The shape are similar, but the general public, they use less familiar CHV terms than the other two groups. So in terms of three metrics for health term level of complexity, the public is more complex than the other two groups, and there is no significant difference between deaf and hard hearing and ASD people. And we also try to check the relationship between different metrics, and we find the readability score. The readability score is negatively related to the 3 health term metrics. And I don't know why, but this is our general finding. And if you go to different user groups, the results became a little different, but the general direction seems similar. I don't know why. Like I don't know whether the negative relationship between readability score and the professional term is just because the characteristics of these 3 groups, or it's just theoretically readability score is negatively related to health term level complexity. I don't know the answer, but this is our observation. And Dr. P want me to figure out the answer, but I don't know where I can go. It's just our main findings. We want to market the finding and also the taxonomy in a journal article.
Yeah.
But we found the difficulties to interpret our findings, and as well as we need to be very careful to market our methodology, and also the limitation. And we need the level we can market ourselves. We need to be very careful. So we are very happy to hear any of your criticism, and we will include that discussion in our journal paper. So I'm done.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for hearing me.
Questions for Biyang? This is good stuff. I really like that taxonomy a lot. I think a lot of people are going to find it really useful. I think you're going to get good feedback from the scholarly community.
I think what my current thought is, we cannot argue the taxonomy is complete for health tax complexity. We cannot argue that. But how can we demonstrate the reliability of our taxonomy and the validity of our taxonomy? I need to carefully, seriously think about from that direction. Do you have any, or any of you have any suggestions for me? And another thing, as Christy said, that we couldn't, because of the noisy user profiles of different platforms, we cannot argue that our finding is exactly ASD people, or it's exactly the autism people, right? But I still think the differences do mean something, do mean some general differences, but it's not a very exact measurement of this group of people if you do tax mining.
Well, it's an initial study, and so you have the opportunity to do several more studies and see if you start seeing patterns emerge, and that'll be a nice way to test what you've created here, to use it multiple times. Other questions?
Or suggestions.
Or suggestions. It's a lot to digest.
Or critics.
I have one question regarding the methods you use for text mining. Is it something like natural language processing techniques or what do you use for that kind of mining techniques or?
We are very practical. We do not use like
Like machine
clustering
learning, okay.
or machine learning or no. We just because all these measurements, they are very straightforward. They are very straightforward, and the technical difficulty is just to download the database and map and extract all the health terms from the stuff. And yeah, we just use that little LP techniques, but not text clustering or text
As you said, it's so
classification.
straightforward that you do not need to mine anything or to get into any pattern there. So
Yeah, all these
it's
these patterns are not from the typical NLP. These patterns are from the results for those formulas. So as long as I can get all the number, and I don't think counting the number is mining,
Yeah.
but it's still the mining procedure.
Yes, but it's very, I mean, it's
It's
not
very-
that complex. Or
No,
something like
no,
that.
yeah.
So for the scores that you get from different formulas, do you consider any weighting or, I mean, which one is more, are there any priority on considering the, for example, first score can represent the complexity more, or they're all weighted like each other and there is no preference or, I mean, are considered at the same time, or do you consider any priority for the scores that you get?
We need to carefully think about that, but currently, we treat them equally because we do not have any evidence to show us which one is more important than the others. And for example, the POS distribution differences are not significant among the three corpus. But does that mean the POS is not needed for consumer comparison? We cannot argue that because we do not have more data to support that argument. But that might be a future direction, and I should write in my paper. Thank you.
All right. This was awesome. Thank you. I hope presenting it and
Yeah.
getting some discussion around it is helpful to you.
Yeah, and I'm down with recording.